How are we doing today? I'm doing all right. Let me see. I believe we were talking about Epicureanism and Stoicism, isn't that correct? So we ended with. I don't think that any of these philosophies that we've discussed up to this point are in and of themselves the truth, the final answer. That's kind of not even the point whenever we explore them, right? You know, what we're trying to do here is just understand the human condition better, and you have to kind of figure out what makes the most sense to you. I like the idea of Epicureanism. I'm sure you do too. Stoicism also has a certain truth to it. We can all understand the concept of cynicism, the idea that we're kind of like lions that have put ourselves in zoos. And that's not really healthy, even though on some level it creates a degree of comfort, a degree of security that a more natural existence wouldn't have. Certainly a lion is better off on the savannah of Africa than a lion would be in a zoo, even though the lion in the zoo is better cared for. The real question is, which choice would that lion make, right? If the lion was capable of making a choice, would the lion choose to be pinned up in a zoo with all his needs cared for, or would he prefer to be out on the savannah? That's where it gets even more interesting. I don't know that I have an answer to that. That's again, the whole point isn't to come up with the final truth, really, is to just explore it. Now, speaking of that, we have to talk one more time. Today is October 5th, correct? We do not have class next Monday on the 10th. It's fall break, the 10th and the 11th. Well, we're finished. I don't believe that we will be able to finish everything that we need to talk about today. So let's just go ahead and ink the 17th as exam 2. And then we're gonna stick to that schedule. So that gives us 2 lectures. And I think we can do it. Now keep in mind, there's also material online that you will need to study. We're not going to talk about everything that would be covered on the test. That's not possible, and this is a hybrid class. So just put that in the back of your head. And if I don't have all the material up that I want you to know, I'll make sure that I do. What's up there already? Is the Exam 2 study guide is up, right? Is there any other supplemental material that I... Oh, you think everything is there?
Yeah.
Okay. Rise of Rome, Fall of Rome, all that. Good. Yes.
Are you going to put grades in Canvas?
I will be putting grades in Canvas very soon. The answer to that is yes. I'm sorry I don't have them up yet. And like I said, I know that midterm grades are due pretty soon. Don't stress about the midterm grades, whatever it is. Okay, I've got to put something in the box. But remember, midterm grades are not actually a reflection of anything. Oh, midterm grades are not something that's going to stick. Midterm grades are just a holdover from a long time ago when people really did not have computers to check everything. So whatever goes in the box on the midterms, don't change it if you don't like it. Whatever, right? Okay, let's move on. Alexander, we're leaving with this. Alexander is, are we all beamed in? We're all here? Okay. Alexander is important because he introduces the world.
Oh, that I forgot to log in.
Oh, okay. He introduces the world to philosophy. He brings what the Greeks did to the entire Western world. Alexander opens the eyes of the Greeks and says, look, let's make every human a philosopher. And then the Greco-Roman world, as we know it, gets created, starting with Alexander. Now I want to talk about, are we there?
No, it won't do it, so I'm trying something else to get in, because I have part of it saved right here.
Oh, you don't want to.
Here, I found out how to get into it.
Make sure that it's the right day, though.
Right day.
See, that's the trick. Remember, each day is unique. So,
That wasn't the right
just use mine, yeah. Y'all do know that. You have to, each day is each one of the forms is a unique form. So, yeah. All right. We're going to start Rome today. We're going to talk about the empire that we have all heard of and the empire that is by all means the most significant of these ancient empires. Rome is also the bridge between the ancient world and the modern world. Rome is an ancient empire that ushers us into the modern era, or a more modern era. Everybody in here has heard of it. Everybody knows that it's significant. Let's go into some details. The city of Rome itself, of course, exists in central Italy, near the Mediterranean coast. It is an absolutely remarkable city simply because so much has happened there. So much of the Western world revolves around Rome. It's just incredible to think of everything that that city is today or has been. But of course, we're talking about Rome as an ancient empire. The city itself was founded somewhere in the neighborhood of the 8th century BC. It was founded somewhere in the neighborhood of the 8th century BC. There are a series of hills. You can't find them today, but there used to be. A whole series of hills and a river known as the Tiber River. And these people founded the city of Rome on these 7 hills along this river, but that's more mythological than anything else. The hills of Rome today are more or less, covered up by the giant city. Rome was initially a city-state. It had all the characteristics of ancient city-states. Rome was an oligarchy, meaning that it was ruled by an elite group of noblemen. And although over the early, generations of Rome, a king or a dictator popped up from time to time, generally speaking, Rome kept this characteristic. They didn't have one single ruler, but instead a series of noblemen that ran the place. The upper classes of Rome are known as the patricians. The upper classes of Rome are known as the patricians. And patricians are best known for the toga, wearing the Roman toga that we are all so familiar with. The commoners in Rome are known as the
What were the top people?
patricians. The patricians. And by the way, that's where the word patriarchy comes from, or a father figure, a paternal figure is a father figure. That's the patricians. They are the father figures of Rome. The commoners in Rome are known as the plebeians, or the plebes. And there's more than one way to spell it. That's good enough for me. And the division between the classes in Rome tended to be very rigid. You are either one or you are the other, and it is a line we do not cross. Your occupation, your social status, who you marry, who you associate with, so on and so forth. And again,
what were the commoners?
plebeians. Now, I am generalizing to a certain extent, but if you are in ancient Rome and you see a dude walking down the street in a toga, you know that is a patrician. If you see somebody walking down the street and they're not in a toga, they are not. I mean, even the clothing distinguished the classes. Rome's ruling body is known as the Senate. Rome's ruling body is known as the Senate. Now, obviously, not every patrician is a senator, but every senator is most definitely a patrician. They are the only people allowed to be in the Senate. And the patricians would wear a purple toga or a toga with a purple fringe on it. So that guy is really important if you see him walking down the street. And an ordinary person might wear this. This is known as a tunic. And a tunic is basically just a big shirt. And this would be the common clothing that we would see worn in much of the ancient world for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. We would see this in the Middle East. The Greeks wore tunics. The Romans wore tunics. That's a tunic. All the way up through the Middle Ages, tunics were the common article of clothing that a regular person wore. But the toga is the clothing of a patrician. You can see the difference there. You can see the difference. This square building, although the outside has been heavily modified, is actually the surviving Senate building from the earliest days of Rome. And the inside is still there. You can actually go and look where the senators were, and they would sit on benches facing each other and debate and pass laws and figure out unique ways to boss everybody else around. Remarkable that the Senate is still there. Now, central and northern Italy is quite fertile. Good land for farming, plenty of rivers and streams for water. Southern Italy is nothing but a bunch of rocks, but northern Italy is perfect for human civilization to develop. And so Rome as a city-state expanded. Rome as a city-state expanded. And we will start calling it Rome in 509 BC. We will start calling it Rome in 509 BC. The earliest inhabitants of Rome we actually call the Etruscans. Whoops, the Etruscans. And then in 509, the Romans kind of conquered them, and that's whenever we really will say that Rome got its own identity. But again, Rome is really just a small city-state. Rome starts expanding into the countryside outside of the city. Rome starts expanding into the countryside outside of the city. And it generally starts moving north because this is where the good land is. Conquering and incorporating other people and growing as a state. The Romans learned a lot from the Greeks. They very much admired the Greeks. They idolized them. They would end up adopting their gods, although they renamed them. They would adopt a lot of their architecture, their culture. The Romans looked at the Greeks with great admiration. And this will be the case throughout Roman history. There is a strong Greek influence in all the things the Romans did. Rome had a powerful army, and it learned a lot from the Greeks there as well. The Roman soldiers fought for patriotism. They fought for glory to the state. They aren't just mercenaries. Roman soldiers fight for Rome, much like an Athenian would fight for Athens. And soldiers were well paid. They were respected. Roman battle techniques they learned from the Greeks. We don't fight as individuals, we fight as units. And the modern military structure that lasts all the way to the present day was designed by Rome. And this means that the Roman army is darn good. They also recruited country boys, rural farmers, to be the rank and file, because these guys are strong and healthy, they can live off the land, they don't have a lot of other options. Officers came from the city, rank and file come from the country. What is a common Roman soldier referred to as? You don't have to write this down, of course, but what do they call them? And again, Rome lasted 1,000 years, so these names sort of modify, but what is the common name for a Roman rank and file soldier? Anyone know? A centurion. A Roman soldier is a centurion. That's a rank and file Roman soldier. And of course, the highest unit of the Roman army was known as a legion, right? And a legion would be, something like 10,000 men, and each legion would be broken up into smaller units, much like we have, divisions and regiments and battalions and companies in the modern military. And there would be different officers that led on different levels and so on and so forth. Roman service in the military was a 25-year commitment. You don't have to write that. Too much detail. You don't need to write this down. But the Romans, if you joined the Roman legions, you would be a soldier for 25 years. And you couldn't get out. Once you signed on the dotted line, that's it. You got 25 years in the legions. But if you made it 25 years, when you retired, you would be given a piece of land of your own and a pension. The state would pay you for the rest of your life and give you a nice piece of land. So it was, an investment for young men that don't have a lot going for them.
Was it required?
Oh, no, it was not required. No. Now, there would be times when they would conscript, but generally speaking, it was a volunteer army. Yeah, but they would pay, if you don't have a whole lot of options and you want to move up, get your own land, whatever, okay, so, you're a teenager, you join the legions. By the time you're in your early 40s, you've got your own piece of land, you're going to get paid for the rest of your life, you're respected because of your service, Not all that different from how our modern military works, if you think about it. That's kind of the same idea. So by 264, Rome has control of the Italian peninsula. You know, what we think of as Italy today, for the most part, is controlled by Rome. There is another Mediterranean state that is growing, and it is the state of Carthage. It is the state of Carthage. Carthage is in North Africa. Carthage is in North Africa, present-day Tunisia. Now, right away, again, I've always said, think about the physical geography and you understand how people live. How do the Carthaginians live? What's their lifestyle? They're fishermen. They're water people. They fish, they trade, they live off the sea. And the reason, of course, is because North Africa is dry as a bone. This is the Sahara Desert. You know, you got a little line of nice green, but the minute you get a few miles south, man, you ain't farming anything there. Nothing but a bunch of sand. And so Carthage is a wealthy city because it trades, it fishes, they do a lot of business. They are a naval power. Rome is a land power. You see, Rome lives off the land, particularly in the north. These are farmers. These are farmers. Rome doesn't have much to do with the water. Rome has to do with the land. Carthage is very concerned about the growing power of Rome. Carthage understands that its lack of good farmland is a significant disadvantage. And so in 264, Carthage attempted to settle the island of Sicily, which is right off the toe. And this is a threat to Rome. You know, the Romans don't like this at all because you're putting a rival state on our border, and Sicily's got a lot of good farmland. You know, they can make something out of Sicily, and Carthage is now seen as a rival. And just to show you how cool Carthage is, Carthage was renowned for its maritime abilities. You know, Carthage had hundreds of ships. Carthage had a powerful navy. They traded all around the Mediterranean. Carthage is wealthy. They just don't have any land. And so they don't have a strong army, but they've got an extremely powerful navy. And this is a key port and a key harbor. And it was man-made by the Carthaginians. And the ships would sail in and dock and unload and do whatever. And if you want to know how cool this is, right, you can still go there today. In Tunisia, there is actually the remains of the Carthaginian port that you can tour. So I think that's super cool, right? It's as awesome as it gets. So yeah. Anyway, Rome and Carthage, of course, are going to have to fight this out. Rome does not want Carthage getting more Mediterranean land. And of course, Carthage is very worried about Rome. And they fight what is known as the Punic Wars. They fight what is known as the Punic Wars over who will control the Mediterranean. The first one broke out in 264 and lasted until 241. So this is a long war. This is a long war.
264 to what?
To 241.
And that was just the first one?
Just the first one, yeah. And the real question is, what's gonna win, naval power or land power? Because see, Rome has an immense army, but no navy. So what are they gonna do with them? They're gonna march around Italy, but they can't fight Carthage if they don't have boats. Carthage has all the boats they want, but they don't have soldiers to fight Rome. So it's not like they can invade Italy because they got no army to invade with. And so how is this going to work out? Naval power or land power? Well, the Romans were extremely good at learning from other people. You know, the Romans were very, very good at figuring out what other people did and incorporating that into their own system. And so, of course, when the Punic Wars broke out, the Romans realized we need a navy, right? We got to have boats. And so between 241 and roughly 260, between 264 and roughly 240, something like that, Rome built its navy. Rome learned how to build boats. Rome learned how to train sailors. Rome learned how to fight Carthage on the water. I mean, Carthage decimated Rome on the water in the early years of the war, but Rome figured it out. And so by 241, the first Punic War ends with a Roman victory. And now Rome is not only a land power, but now Rome is a sea power. Rome is not just a land power, Rome is a sea power. And Carthage is very worried, as you can probably imagine. Carthage has to win round two. Carthage has to figure out how to stop Rome, because Rome will now be in a position to run over everybody if we don't stop them. Carthage turned to Iberia, present-day Spain, because these people over here have plenty of good farmland, and they're just as worried about the Romans as the Carthaginians are. They're just as worried about Rome as the Carthaginians are. The next Punic War breaks out in 218. And Carthage starts it. Carthage has to find a way to knock those Romans down a peg. And the key general of the Second Punic War is Hannibal. The key general is Hannibal. His father had been the big Carthaginian leader that was defeated the first time around. And so he's going to avenge his father. And Hannibal was raised with just a seething hatred of Rome. And I am going to, once I'm old enough, I am going to lead an army and I'm going to crush those Romans and get them back for beating us the first time around. And Hannibal did something very interesting. And we're moving kind of quickly, but we have to. Hannibal marched an army across southern Europe and invaded Rome from the north. Hannibal marched an army across southern Europe and invaded Rome from the north. And he had an army of somewhere in the neighborhood of 45,000 men. Carthaginians and Iberians. We won't call them Spaniards yet. Spain doesn't exist, but their descendants will be Spaniards. Now, why do you think Hannibal is going to go through the north? Why does Hannibal do that? Trick them, right? You see, up here is a huge mountain range, the Alps. And the Alps are the biggest mountain range in Central Europe. It is considered impassable, at least by any kind of an army. And so Rome doesn't have any defenses up there. Rome doesn't have any armies or anything in the north because there's no enemy. There's nobody that's going to attack us, and so why bother? And so when Hannibal marches his army in from the north, he just takes Rome completely by surprise. He just flat out goes in the way they're not expecting. Hannibal also, oddly enough, just pure curiosity, but it's interesting, Hannibal brought with him several dozen African war elephants. You see, Africa's got elephants. And elephants are smart, and wild elephants are really, really mean. The elephant that you see in the zoo is not the way elephants are supposed to be. Elephants, speaking of, the tigers on the frontier versus the tigers in the zoo. Elephants in the zoo have had their personalities basically broken because wild elephants are just the meanest animals you're ever going to find. And if you train them to be cavalry, yeah, you're in real trouble, at least in the ancient world. And of course, the Romans had never even seen elephants. And so these Carthaginians are, charging on these elephants right toward the Roman legions, and the Romans just completely freak out. I mean, it's like they're riding dinosaurs or something. But the Carthaginians, they were smart. One particularly notable battle was the Battle of Zama. Oh, no, not Zama, sorry. The Battle of Cana. in 216 BC, of course, and Hannibal just crushed a Roman army. He just crushed a Roman army. And for the next several years, he just wreaked havoc up and down Italy. Just caused all kinds of problems. The problem that Hannibal had is that he couldn't take the city of Rome itself, and he couldn't really win. You know, the Romans just kept fighting him. You know, they just kept in it. And so over the next several years, yeah, Hannibal caused a lot of problems, but he didn't end the war. And as long as you hold out, sooner or later, Hannibal has to give up. Eventually, in 202, again, many years after the initial invasion, Rome decided to get rid of him by invading Carthage. And Rome sent an army to North Africa, which meant that Hannibal had to go home to defend his city. There he fought the Battle of Zama, and it was fought right here outside of Carthage. And Hannibal was defeated. So Rome wins. Hannibal was defeated, and that means Rome wins. Round 1, Romans. Round 2, Romans. Again, stop writing. But the Roman general that defeated Hannibal, now again, Hannibal's been pestering Rome now for 16 years. The Roman general that defeated him was Scipio Africanus. That was the Roman general, Scipio Africanus. And so Rome would eventually, of course, conquer Carthage and begin calling it the province of Africa to honor Scipio, who had defeated Hannibal and brought Carthage under the Roman sphere. And you can connect the dots from there. And Scipio, of course, was a huge Roman hero as being the man that defeated Hannibal. And again, don't write this, but Hannibal was avenging his father's defeat. At the Battle of Cana in 216, Scipio's father had been defeated. He was the Roman general that was crushed at the Battle of Cana. And so Scipio, being a little boy or a young man, was raised to defeat Hannibal. And then in 202, Scipio gets to defeat Hannibal because Hannibal had defeated his father, and Hannibal defeated his father because Rome had defeated his father. Generational anger is what we're really dealing with here. There will be a third Punic War, but at this point, Carthage is just a city-state. And this was in 146 BC, and Rome just stomped Carthage. I mean, it was that simple. You know, Carthage had no way of preventing Rome from doing this. And so in 146, after several more decades, Rome just solved the problem of Carthage once and for all and ended it. Rome just solved the problem of Carthage, and that was that. Now Rome is the dominant state in the Mediterranean. This is Hannibal's route. We don't know how he crossed the Alps, by the way. You know, even to this day, all of the ways that he could have gone are not really feasible given the technology that he had. And so how Hannibal was able to get his army over the Alps, especially with a bunch of elephants, nobody has any clue. Nobody has any clue. There are no natural passes through the Alps which he could have used. Rome is now in a position to absolutely dominate. There is no state in the Mediterranean as powerful as Rome, and Rome just starts conquering one region after another. You know, one bite here, one bite there. Rome, of course, moves south into Africa. We already mentioned that. Rome moves west into Iberia, and Iberia is Spain and Portugal. Rome moves north into Western Europe. Rome will eventually rule Britain. You know, what is today England would eventually be conquered and ruled by Rome. You don't have to write this down, but they will establish a capital of Britain, which is an outpost. You know what? Come on. There we go. This is at the far corners of the empire where nobody wants to be. And they will establish a governing city, and they will call it Londinium. And the Roman city of Londinium is the provincial capital of Britain. And that's where Roman patricians basically go to die. None of them wanted to go there because it's cold and wet, and you know, those English are weirdos, you know, whoever's living there, and all they did was write home saying, get me back to the Mediterranean, and it rains too much here. Rome is going to move east into Greece and present-day Turkey, what we call Anatolia. And that's the wealthiest part. That's the part that really brings in the wealth and the power. You know, that's where it's all happening in the Western world. You know, these people are crazy. These people are crazy. These people are a bunch of sand. These people is where the money is. I mean, that's how they see it. The Gauls are a bunch of barbarians. The Iberians are a bunch of barbarians. There's nothing in North Africa because it's just a bunch of desert. And so Greece and Anatolia is where Rome really wants to be. But of course, Rome will eventually conquer it all. Rome will eventually conquer it all. By 44 BC, the Mediterranean itself is just a Roman lake. Rome controls effectively everything along the Mediterranean, this entire area. And when you think of the gigantic dominant state that Rome will be, think of it as a Mediterranean state. Don't think of it like this. Think of it like this. It is a giant body of water surrounded by people that are all connected by that water. And of course, the capital is right here, which can serve as a hub for the entire Roman state. And so Rome becomes very wealthy because Rome is connected, Rome trades, Rome interacts. All these different people are interacting with all of these other people. Think Alexander the Great, and that makes everybody better off. And the diversity of Rome is just bewildering. I mean, there's every kind of person imaginable is going to exist in this Mediterranean state that we call Rome. Of course, all is not perfect. We know that. The problem with this system is that the Roman economy depends on conquest. Every time we take in a new region, we get wealthier. Every time we take in a new region, we can loot the wealth, send it into the Roman treasury. And of course, what happens to the generals and the soldiers that are responsible for taking that bite? If you are the great general, you know, Gludius Maximus, and you go into a region and you conquer it, what happens to you? You're wealthy. Oh yeah, you become a great hero, right? You know, you get a great benefit from that. You know, if you are responsible for bringing wealth and glory to Rome, man, that's exactly what you want. And of course, generals like to conquer, don't they? You know, when you're a hammer, the whole world looks like a nail. And so Rome becomes this Pac-Man that just eats everything it gets near. And it doesn't matter if these people are peaceful. It doesn't matter if these people are different. It doesn't matter who these people are. If you are on the border of Rome, we're coming for you. If you're on the border of Rome, you might as well just get ready because you're going to be in Rome the minute our army shows up. And the entire economy starts depending on it. Now, what happens when there is enormous amounts of wealth and power and glory for any general that can go into a region and conquer it? This becomes something the generals want to do. And the power of the Senate to control the army, the power of the Senate to regulate this, forget about it. It doesn't matter. As long as you win, you are a hero. As long as you win, that's all that really matters. And so this becomes incredibly corrupt. This becomes incredibly full of intrigue and difficulty. Being in the Senate or being in the army really becomes an occupation of self-service. All you want to do is become as wealthy and powerful as you can become. That's why you want to be a senator. You don't want to be a senator to, govern justly. You don't want to be a senator to represent the ordinary people and maintain a safe, stable nation for all of these millions of people that now belong in Rome. You're in the Senate for number one. And you don't want to become a general to defend us against those barbarians on our border. You're a general because you know you can use that army to conquer and bring yourself wealth and loot. We begin to see the cities in Rome, and the city of Rome itself will be the best example, become absolutely full of refugees, of poor people, of suffering people, of people who are not able to benefit from this type of system. Rome does not think well of the poor, of the disadvantaged, of the dispossessed. If you are not able to climb to the top, if you are not strong and powerful, you are worthless. You are either here or you are nobody. That's the division that we see in Rome. There's no compassion for anybody who can't quite make it. And so Rome will achieve great wealth and glory, but great savagery at the same time. At one point, two brothers came along, the Gracchus brothers. One was named Tiberius, and the other Gaius. And in 133, the Gracchus brothers, who became senators, begin to call for reform that resolves a lot of this. This ain't good, is what they're saying. This is not a society that governs in the best interest of the people. Sooner or later, we're going to start seeing real problems. What happens when one of these generals realizes that he's more powerful than the Senate? What happens when one of these generals realizes that he can do anything he wants? Because who are his men really loyal to? Him, right? Before soldiers were loyal to the state. Now soldiers are loyal to whoever pays them the most. And they call for a few reforms. For example, they call for a limit to how much land any one man can own. Sound familiar? Right? They call for political authority to be given to the plebeians, ordinary people. Let ordinary people have a say in what the laws are, not just the wealthy and the rich. Again, does that sound familiar? They call for laws that will restrict slavery. And of course, slavery was common in Rome. And Roman slavery, for most of its existence, was incredibly brutal and inhumane. Slavery by its nature is inhumane, but if you are a slave in Rome, you are 100% the property of your owner. He can do anything to you. Your human rights simply do not exist. If he wants to kill you, he can kill you. If he wants to assault you, he can assault you. If he wants to torture you, there is nothing that you can do to prevent anything if you are a slave. And there are stories of slave owners just engaging in terrible cruelty, and it was perfectly legal. You own them. Do it, I can kill my horse too if I want, right? I can burn my house to the ground. It belongs to me. You are nothing but property if you are a slave in Rome. It's very disturbing. Now, of course, when the Gracchus brothers go to the leadership in Rome and say, we got to do something about this, folks. This is going off the rails. Wealth and power and glory of Rome isn't the only goal we should achieve. We have serious, serious flaws in our society that are sooner or later going to come back and get us. What do you think happened to the Gracchus brothers? Right? Both of them ended up getting assassinated. You see, if you want to move up in Rome, you do it by any means necessary. Political assassinations were routine in the Senate. Getting rid of your enemy by destroying him in one way or another is the way the system works. It's not the exception, it's the rule. It's not the exception, it's the rule. One general named Marius soldiers entirely from the loot of conquest. He just dismissed with any connection to the state. His soldiers effectively became his personal army. You know, the hell with the state, forget what the Senate says, don't even bother accepting that pay. I will pay you from the conquest, and you will have far more. And the Senate is too scared to do anything about it because Marius also has an army. And those soldiers are a lot more loyal to him than they are to the Senate. One ruler named Sulla briefly ruled Rome. Sulla became a dictator for a brief period of time. And Sulla quit while he was ahead. You know, he knew sooner or later someone's going to stab me in the back. So he ruled Rome for a few years and then stepped down and lived the rest of his life, I'm assuming, quite luxuriously. In 60 BC, there are 3 men in Rome that run Rome's military. There are 3 main Roman armies, and these are the generals. One general was Crassus, one general was Pompey, and one general was Julius Caesar. One general was Crassus, one general was Pompey, one general is Caesar. And their armies were in different regions. You know, Crassus was in present-day Turkey, Caesar was up in present-day France, and Pompey was in Spain and Italy. These men are friends. These men obviously know each other quite well, and they are not enemies. You don't have to write this down, but if the stories of Crassus are true, he is easily the wealthiest man that has ever existed, has ever lived. If the amount of gold they say he owned is in fact accurate, nobody that has ever lived is as wealthy as Crassus was. We all know which one of these guys matters the most, right? And there's pretty much no doubt that Caesar was the most powerful of the 3. This region up here, present-day France, sort of, is Gaul in Rome. That's what they called it. And Caesar had conquered Gaul for Rome. It was by far the largest conquest ever, the greatest military achievement ever. And after doing so, his men practically worshipped him. And it made him just phenomenally popular and wealthy. The Gauls had been giving Rome trouble for generations. And Caesar went in and crushed them. Caesar went in and crushed them. Crassus, Pompey, and Caesar got together. And they decided, let's just take over. We are the army. You know, there are no other armies in Rome that matter. So if we 3 work together, we can run the place. Let's just go to Rome and we're now in charge. Now you can stop writing. There is debate over their motives. Now, it doesn't take a lot of genius to figure out what's really going on, but the logic wasn't we're just going to be greedy dictators. They already were as wealthy as any men could possibly ever want to be. Their argument is Rome has become so corrupt. Rome has become so backward. The Senate is so incompetent. You know, every time we turn around, some senator is killing another. You know, you get what you want by bribing them. There's all kinds of poor and dispossessed people all throughout the streets. We need some strong leaders to just go in and clean the place up. And that's really what we'll do. Now, dictators always say that, and dictators never deliver on that. Anytime a dictator says, give me all the power and I'll clean the place up, that's the first time you need to say that is definitely not what's really going on. Never believe that logic. But that was the going idea. We are strong men, we are intelligent men, we will straighten this place out. And we know that this isn't going to work at all. Crassus ended up dying. He died in a battle. So he's out of the equation. And that just leaves Pompey and Caesar. And Pompey figures out very quickly that Caesar ain't sharing power with anybody. You know, that's not what ambitious men do. When you are so ambitious that you climb the ranks of the Roman military, you are not somebody who shares power. And Pompey and Caesar, although personally they were on very good terms, Pompey and Caesar both knew we're not sharing power. It's either him or it's me. The Senate passed a law. There is a river in northern Italy, and it is called the Rubicon. It is called the Rubicon. And the Senate passed a law. Any army that crosses the Rubicon is guilty of treason. Indication of how bad things have gotten in Rome, right? We can't even let our own army be on the Italian peninsula. But they see Caesar up in Gaul, and they realize if Caesar goes into Italy itself, he is only coming to overthrow the government. That's the only reason Caesar could be here. And so they pass a law. Any army that crosses the Rubicon is immediately guilty of treason. So now Caesar has to ask himself, if I go into Italy and march on Rome, I better win. Because if I lose, there you go. And the legend has it, you don't have to necessarily see this as fact, it's an apocryphal story, but the legend has it he marched his men to the banks of the Rubicon and turned to his men and said, okay, you tell me what to do. If we march on Rome and we win, glory for us all. But obviously, the minute we step over that river, we are now guilty of treason. And of course, what did his men tell him to do? Go for it. Straight line to Rome. We are on a path to glory. And crossing the Rubicon, it's not used so much anymore, but crossing the Rubicon is usually a term used for taking an action where you know there is great risk, but yet there is also great reward. And you can stay on the other side and nothing happens, but the minute you cross over the line, it's the point of no return. I don't know if you've ever skydived, but you're standing in the door of the plane, right, and you feel the wind. The minute you step out of that plane, there ain't no going back, is there? Right? And that's crossing the Rubicon. Once I step over, I'm fully committed. I'm fully committed. And that mental state is what we're talking about. And Caesar would say, and psychologists say, people who are not willing to cross the Rubicon in the challenges of life never end up being successful. The success that comes in life comes from stepping out of that plane. Because if you're not willing to take risks that have consequences, then you're never going to achieve what you want. The path to success in life always involves having the ability to take risks. And when you look at people who have, genuinely succeeded in life, there are always people who will say, I will take that risk. I will step over the line. I will be the person who understands you can't win any other way. You can't win any other way. You got to step onto the field, right? You have to step onto the field or you can't win the game. Well, I am simplifying a much more complicated story, but Pompey tried to defeat Caesar. The Senate, of course, was behind Pompey. Caesar defeated Pompey and almost certainly was going to. Caesar then marches into Rome and he wins. Now, the truth is, he did not conquer Pompey. He didn't defeat Pompey for another couple of years. But Caesar marches into Rome, and there he is. The Senate, of course, has no way to oppose him. There is no way to stop him. And so the Senate declares Caesar dictator. And he will eventually be declared dictator for life. Initially, it was for 10 years. But then he is dictator for life. Caesar does not seek revenge or retribution against the people that had opposed him. As long as you recognize that I'm the boss, we're cool. But the Senate is now a puppet. The Senate has no authority. The Senate exists on paper. In practice, the Senate is only there to do Caesar's bidding. And Caesar was immensely popular. The people loved Caesar. He holds rallies and parades and all this stuff, and Rome was real good at that stuff. Caesar subsidizes agriculture, meaning he gives farmers enough money to keep profitable. Caesar implements all kinds of public works projects, roads and bridges, stuff like that. And that gives jobs to people. You know, Caesar's the reason why I have a job. Caesar is the reason why that road got built. Caesar is the reason why those corrupt men in the Senate are no longer able to take advantage of us. Hail Caesar, right? Hail Caesar. Now, how do you get ahead in Rome? By defeating the guy you don't like, right? In 44 BC, Caesar has been in power for 5 years now. And a group of people, a group of so-called friends, senators, arranged a meeting. A group of senators arranged a meeting. Hey, Caesar, we want to talk to you about something. Let's confer. And so Caesar goes to the Senate. And what day was this? Somebody remembers this from English Lit. The Ides of March, March 15th. Yeah, the Ides of March. On March 15th or so, the legend goes. Caesar went to the Senate to meet with these senators. Hey guys, you know, what's up? What do you need? And of course, what did they do? They surrounded him and assassinated him. Shakespeare wrote the play Julius Caesar, and most people now today think that Shakespeare's version is the history, that Shakespeare, just like Hollywood today, embellished and changed the story into something that it really wasn't. The men assassinated Caesar because he was a dictator and they wanted him out of the way, but Caesar turned it into some sort of glorious, you know, they're saving Rome from a tyrant sort of thing. Who is the most, and we'll leave of course, but who is the most notable of the assassins? Brutus, Caesar's friend Brutus. And that's all only because of Shakespeare. Shakespeare just decided that Brutus was Caesar's best friend. And, you know, the legend is they all stabbed him and Caesar is dying. And Brutus hasn't done it yet. Brutus hasn't stabbed him. So that means Brutus is still technically innocent. You see, what happens if we kill Caesar and it ends up being a bad thing? We're guilty of killing the guy everybody loves, right? We're in trouble, right? Or we might end up solving a problem. And Brutus hadn't crossed the Rubicon. You know, Brutus is still a witness. And so Brutus realizes, I either have to become guilty myself or, you know, I'm in trouble. So Brutus realizes, I got to cross that Rubicon. So the legend has it, of course, Brutus gave Caesar one stab at the end, so he was technically guilty too, even though Caesar was already going to die. And Caesar, oh, et tu, Brute, you too, my friend Brutus. Well, in that case, I think I'll die. All made up. Brutus was a bastard just like the rest of them. Caesar dies, and you'll have to find out what happens next a week from today. I will not be in my office tomorrow afternoon. I will also not be in my office on Friday. So if you need to see me or talk to me, get in touch, and I'll talk to y'all later.